So the first slides are only there for, so it's kind of complete, and I do share the slides. So then you have all of this, but this is kind of a collection of criteria for ethical research, more generally not related to AI. And I don't want to go through all of that, but of course, informed consent, legal compliance, we're going to revisit that in the relation to AI. But of course, we had ethical guidelines before we had AI, and here you see a whole list of them, and you're probably familiar with them as well, especially if you had to go through ethical review boards. And so I would like to start here because there is lots to cover, and I'm not covering everything. It's more like what I want to cover is that part that really relates to doing research. There are, of course, ethical concerns, and you might have seen those discussions online, also in blogs and podcasts. One is the sustainability and environmental ethics, because it takes lots of computing power, and where are we taking all that power from? And we there's issues on climate change anyway, and this might contribute to that. But so that's not what we're talking about. There's another whole discussion on the crowdsourcing, on people who are tagging information that goes in to training or fine-tuning the models, and for fair compensation and labor laws and invisible labor and their recognition. So that's another whole, probably could have a talk about that on its own. And regarding to that, also the mental health and well-being of people who sit there and have to tag, lots and lots of pieces of information. And the other big discussion, and you're probably aware of the informed consent for data use, so that would what the big tech have been using to train models. And OpenAI the New York Times has been suing OpenAI, so that is still all open. But I think that's also something we could discuss that, but something to decide in the court and on the legal level. So we could have an opinion about that, but in the end, that will be solved in court. But of course, those issues are there. What I rather want to focus on is that part that we more immediately have to deal with when we actually conduct research. I have given a whole presentation on bias, and you can see that in the recording. It would, of course, it's parts of ethic. It will come back a little bit here, but there is a whole long hour of 45 minutes where I have the complete presentation on that. Regulatory compliance is in Europe especially important. GDPR compliance, or these different ones that relate to the different laws that apply in your countries. So we only briefly touch on that. And I want to start here with when it comes to ethics and protecting our research participants. And that has to do with consent, confidentiality agreements, of course, transparency, privacy, and also then related to that, data handling and reporting. So the reporting part, that's more giving you some guidelines on how you report in a journal article or in your thesis, if you have been using AI, either for literature review or for fine-tuning your research question or for transcription analysis, and how you actually put that into the reporting. And there's also some references where you can read some more in the end. I put that in the presentation, so you can always look up more information. So if we start now with the confidentiality agreement, and we have to just add some new parts if we're dealing with AI, and that is the parts I put now here in orange. So all the other parts are standard items that should be in a confidentiality agreement. And let me just kind of differentiate that with informed consent. Because in informed consent, that's something, you kind of can agree to that, but then, or you don't participate. That's like when we go to hospital, and if you look into the health research bits, and they also have that issue because lots of AI is used there as well. Well, you want to have an operation in a hospital, yeah, they inform you of all of these things, but you either go home and don't have the operation, or you sign that thing. So that's a bit of a different issue, and that's also what they discuss, of course, now, that people can't even, you cannot explain them everything what relates to AI and how all these tools work, especially if they're very technical. So that's also a big discussion in health research, where mostly it's about informed consent. But what we are doing in qualitative research is mostly confidentiality agreements, where there is also an options for people then to opt out, or to actually react to that, or if you breach confidentiality, that there might be some consequences. So that's a bit different from consent. So here in that case, there is an issue of, okay, who is owning the data? So it's and who's using the data. So as the researcher, you're using the data, but the participants still own whatever they tell you. And if they say, I don't want to participate any more longer, it's their data, and then you can't use them any longer. And who's using also the data is the AI tools, because they need to read the data, they need to do something with the data. And so they are, in that sense, also the part that is using the data. Then you have to define what's confidential information. And here it's not only the transcript, but also included in that everything that AI generates, that also needs to be then treated confidential. And then we have the purpose of the statement, obligations, and you can skip that because these are standard bits. Then we go to the handling of the data. And here we need to know a little bit more about how data are stored and processed and protected. And there we need to look into the privacy agreements of the tools that we are using, if I've recently looked at also what standard software they have integrated OpenAI, but then they kind of only refer to their privacy statements. So you then also have to look at the privacy statements of the large language models that are actually included in the tools that you want to be using. And I will be talking more about that specifically on what actually is happening to your data, because we need to understand that in order to make an informed decision whether we trust the AI tools, because as it is now, for right now, most of the time we have to send data to the large language model to be processed until we get tools that can be locally installed on our institutional servers or on our own computers, but we're not there yet. So most of the time, most tools at this stage will be using OpenAI ChatGPT because of the quality. I've just read today that Mistral, that's a large language model coming from France, it's almost now par at the same level as OpenAI, so that is going to be an interesting contender as well in the future. But also there, it's you need to understand what those tools, how those tools handle data in order then to inform your participants this is what's happening, and in order for you to decide, depending on what participants you have, whether you trust those tools and whether you can share those data with the AI tools. And then the next one you have probably read by now, how tools will be used in the data analysis. So whether you use it for coding, or you press on a button and the analysis is done, or you interact with the data. So that also kind of needs to be made clear to the people, so they kind of know whether the AI is doing the analysis, or whether there is some back and forth between the human and the AI, and who is making in the end the final decision on the results. That is also a standard part, the disclosure required by law. And you do also see that when you look into the privacy agreements with, like, for example, OpenAI, because they're also required by law to keep the data until they delete it, and they say up to 30 days, and probably they won't keep them that long. But there are some regulatory requirements, and that is something you can put into the agreement so people know that data might be stored up to 30 days if that is what your tool is doing, and then you can inform your participants, and then you have their agreement with that. But most tools have that have that kind of requirement in there. So now I want to talk more about the tools so that you can make an informed decision of what you want to use. So when it comes to data transcription, you have two tools that you can use. They're open source tools. They use AI, but you can install them locally. So you don't have an issue with having to send, if you want to use automatic transcription, because then that's not anonymized data. You have your raw data that you then have to send somewhere for transcription if you want to use automatic transcription. So these are two tools, and I can, if I share the PowerPoint, you have the links, but I can also share the links in the feed in the community, so which you can download there. And they work actually quite good in also 99 languages. So you can see here is using the open source bit from OpenAI. So OpenAI also has a model that's Whisper that is used, I think, in both of these tools. You need to have a fast computer. If you don't have a fast computer, it takes long. So that means, transcribing might take just overnight for one interview. So because these models do take up a lot of capacity. That's why you normally have to use, if you use ChatGPT, we cannot at this stage use it on local machines because it just takes lots of capacity. So if you download that and try it out, it works. The quality is also quite good, also in terms of like dialects, and at least the feedback that has been given so far. And English is in general, for those with English participants, that's less of a problem always. It's more with other languages and dialects. But be prepared, if you don't have like a top of the line computer, it might take long. Yeah. So it's not like, because if you have used something that is like Auto AI or something, you get it back within like 3 minutes. Yeah, here it might take 3 hours or even overnight. Just be prepared for that. But this gives you a chance actually to help use automatic transcription, and you can then, once it's done, you also have all the possibilities to check your transcript. You have the audio, you have the transcript, and then you can go through and correct everything. And then you can there's a question also, can be ever anonymized, but anonymized add pseudonyms to change the names of all participants, so nobody, no third party would kind of recognize where the data come from, or change places and that kind of stuff, or take them out. Because if you then decide to use a tool where you upload data, you might even then take out parts of the data where you think, that could identify people, I don't want to have that. So that could be a chance that you then can prepare your transcript, which is then has a higher degree of anonymity. And now I want to say a little bit more about AI and data security and how data is handled. So if you know this part, you have been listening to that, but it does fit here as well, again, because it is something that helps you to make a decision in order to have ethical to conduct your research in an ethical way, because you can only make a informed decision if you know how things work. And the first thing that you need to know, and a lot of people don't know, is there is a difference with you using ChatGPT. Can you just raise your hand if you, I think everybody of you has been using ChatGPT on the browser? I don't know with the other ones who don't see pictures yet. Like Sam and the others haven't used it. Anna has used it. Yeah, Paul, other like, and yeah, Eve has, yeah. Okay, a number of, now I see the hands are going up. So we can all use ChatGPT 3.5 for free. If you do the plus version, you can, you get the model 4. We can all set it to not send data to ChatGPT for training if you go into the privacy mode. But that still is different from an app having built-in ChatGPT. Most of these days have built-in ChatGPT as like a provider of a service, because as a company you can make a contract with OpenAI, and that's different. Even if you have the plus version, you are a consumer, and OpenAI is not making assigned a DPA with all of the consumers, and the DPA is required in the European context because I think most people know that the GDPR is probably one of the highest standard, and also other countries look at in terms of data privacy. So that is one thing that companies can do in order then to make sure that their app is GDPR compliant. So that is something very important. Yeah, like that point about that you have to comply with legal regulations. The other important aspect here is when as a developer puts something into their app, they get what is called an API key that they can build in their application. And the API key is a chain of numbers and letters, like about 20 or something. So it's like a password in a sense. And when you use an app that has a large language model built in, and then you ask a question, and then of course the data needs to be sent. Let's just keep ChatGPT as an example. The data needs to be sent to OpenAI. And in order for that door to open, for the data to be sent, the API key needs to be there, because now we have a connection between OpenAI. There's a key on this end and a key on the other end. Yeah. And without that key, data wouldn't go in, or data could not be read at the other end. And then you could kind of say, okay, what happens in between? Yeah, the data is now having to travel from my computer to OpenAI's server. And while the data is traveling through space, so to speak, it is encrypted. And what you can read, if you look at data privacy agreements or trust pages of companies, there is something about data encrypted with this while in rest and in transit. So there are different ways of encrypting data while data is traveling and while data is resting on the service when they're not moving. And the encryption standard you probably are familiar with from your email, HTTP, something with, HTTP. And that is a 256-bit encryption. And that means, I don't have the picture now here, but that means it takes even a supercomputer, not a quantum computer, but a very effective computer. It takes a couple thousand years to actually break that transcription, that encryption. So, and you know how fast data are back. You type something and within like 10 seconds you get an answer. Or if you use other tools, it might just take half a minute before you get an answer. But it's a very short time that your data actually travels to the server. It's going to be processed, sending it back. And if somebody is catching your data in between, it would take them a long time, to figure out what it is, and then they are 3,000 years later. They kind of say, well, if we get quantum computers, it might be faster, but not a lot of people will have quantum computers, and then they might actually have like a 512-bit encryption. So it's actually quite safe, even if the data are traveling through space to the server. And then, of course, the data needs to be processed. So what happens there? Again, there's another key. So once if you imagine that as a tunnel at the other end, that is the other key that OpenAI has, and that is only a key that OpenAI has for the app you are using. So if a certain let's just take Ludra as an example. So of course we also have such an agreement. So the Ludra has that AI key built in. So if you in the future try out our software, then there is another API key that is only can unlock data that is sent from Ludra and not from any other services. So these keys do match. And if somebody sends some, from somewhere else, it doesn't work. So the door wouldn't open. And then when the data are processed, well, you have to not imagine it like OpenAI is reading the data, because that's sometimes what you hear, like, but OpenAI is reading along, and that's why I cannot, it's all reading all my participants' data. And and it doesn't work like that. So of course, the neural networks don't read data as like what we have them in text. So all of your data is put into like very small pieces, that these are the tokens that can be just a chunk of a word or just words, and it's all mangled up and processed in different layers. Neural networks are in different layers and process it all at the same time. And it's we had just had that the other day ago, something when we tried out the tool, it was the Qualcoder actually, which is also from Kai Dröge, who makes the NoScribe app, that the AI wasn't going through the data sequentially. And that is, of course, while the AI doesn't care, whether it doesn't know anything of the sequentiality, because all of these tokens, all your data is taken apart while it's being processed. And every time I'm thinking about it and how much, thousands of characters are processed in, that time, you have to send it, it comes back within seconds. I'm just still always in awe about that technology that we have now at our hands. So I already talked about that. It's all processed at the same time, and it does that in order to be able to relate things across sentences, in order to inform based on understanding on the data input. And maybe I already say that at this stage, you hear probably a lot that I can identify patterns in the data. And also as a promise of a tool, that builds in AI, so that the AI can find patterns in the data. Well, it finds patterns in the language because that's what it's trained on language, but it's not finding the patterns that we, in an analysis, as qualitative research, would identify, because those patterns we identify require context knowledge and a lot of other knowledge apart from just the single letters that are there. So always you have to make a difference between the language that's also used also for training, for processing, and actually what a qualitative researcher does in analysis. So the kind of patterns and relationship it finds here, it's different from what we are after when analyzing data. So now it is a matter of, like, if you know that, like, how that works, and that data is actually transferred very secure, and these companies who offer these services, that's their core business, so they kind of know what they're doing, and they invest a lot of technology in that, or they're the people who work there, they are trained, and also in terms of data security. So oftentimes it's just a matter of trust. Do I trust those providers? Do I trust the infrastructure, the servers? And it's not a matter of objective security or not. Yeah, so they're called SaaS providers, and that's their basic business. And one of the issues is probably also in terms of mistrust, because AWS is Amazon Web Service, while Azure is Microsoft, and Google Cloud is Google. And we know Google and Amazon from different contexts, because Amazon is selling us goods, Google is selling us while advertising on YouTube or on Google search, whatever. But it's a completely different business, because that's their business model there, and they need a lot of infrastructure. And then they decided, well, that they can make this infrastructure available also for other people, because they know what they're doing, and that's completely different service that they're offering. But in our minds, Google is Google and Amazon is Amazon, and they all kind of collect data and do something. And we're not trusting in that data would be kept secure and private. So that's probably also one of the reasons why there is often a lack of trust in there. But objectively, there should be that shouldn't be there. But you also have to, of course, live within the organizational restraints, or what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to do. So this is some data the German person has actually collected, and you see that trust is slowly increasing in cloud computing, and also here from the statistics. So we see more and more people start using this is a German statistic here, but cloud storage. And so it is increasing slowly, and I think most of the future will also be in cloud computing. What we do see is that I've just recently read that Amazon is selling basically their cloud computing as a service to be installed on the premises of companies and institutions, or possibly also universities, so that universities have the control, and basically it's all the same services, but then they can say, well, it's our premises, it's in our control, and they can use all these security measures that they use. So that is the conclusion from Topalidis, who wrote that article, and you have the link also in the references, that modern cloud systems are largely able to achieve security goals, and the biggest security risk of cloud systems are identical to the risk of traditional systems. So would not be a reason to say we can't use them, but it's a matter of you deciding whether you think that is safe enough for your data that you are having. And just to give you some security indicators, of course, all Europeans look at that an app needs to be GDPR compliant, otherwise they cannot use it. If you're in California, it's a CCPA compliance that you need. And SOC 2 and SOC 3 are interesting ones, and that's OpenAI has gone through those audits, and SOC 2 is an audit which goes, but people have to go through, lots of different things in order to make sure that they are secure. And so if you have that stamp, SOC 2 stamp, then you are evaluated to be safe for highly sensible health data. And SOC 3 is not a stronger one. SOC 3 is actually less than SOC 2, because that's a self-audit. So where companies look for themselves whether they fulfill certain requirements. SOC 2 is an external audit, so that's a bit more stringent. But these are the kind of security indicators you can look out for in order to evaluate a tool, and where you can say, oh, these are the kind of data I trust. to give to those tools. Any questions before we move on? Then I move on. So we have two more topics to go through, and then that is the data analysis and the writing part. So how do we actually write a report when we have used AI tools in order to ensure integrity, transparency, and also accountability? Let's start with data analysis. And I thought some images often speak more than words. I've created them with DALL-E. I wanted to, of course, create a certain image, and then these were kind of my mishaps, but I thought they actually work well. So if you look at this one here, where the AI basically is like, taller, and that indicates like maybe more powerful than the human. So the AI kind of tells the human, no, this is what you should do. Second one, the AI is kind of doing has a laptop on his lap, and the researcher kind of looks, and that's more kind of the analysis. I press on a button, the AI is doing it for me. So we have all tools that do that. But then we can also imagine, and I think that's where we move into a more safer space in terms of bias, and it's part of ethics, but also in terms of conducting more ethical research, that the researcher is in control and the AI is the assistant. And the researcher is in constant dialogue with the AI in order to evaluate the outcome, in order to ask more in-depth questions, and send the AI back to look more at the data or look into more detail. And I see some bias in the data, can give me some other perspectives and so on. So that is more an insurance for a lot of things, be it bias and also ethical concerns, that will actually help for you to conduct a better or an ethical, a more ethical analysis. And so that speaks to integrity, that the AI is just an add to the human effort and not a substitute. So it's not replacing or doing analysis for the research. And of course we see that a lot, or apps promise, it's all done by AI, and within very short time you have an analysis, and that might be good for certain types of research, but for academic research it's probably more problematic in any case. And this is a quote I just picked out of a very recent publication, and it's out of an editorial. You have the reference at the end, the ethics of using generative AI for qualitative data analysis. And let me just read that that quote. Is, I think, an interesting paper. You have the link, you can download it and read it. The automated qualitative coding can only examine syntax, but cannot genuinely grasp data semantic and pragmatic aspects. And you do have, well, I uploaded it also in the community. It's on a YouTube video where actually they exactly showed that, like, how does AI coding look like if you do it automatically, and how did human coding look like? And that's expressed in its sentence that the codes, they examine syntax, but it's not the way a human would code. So an automatic coding process could lead to a banal and neutral analysis that fails to identify or disclose hidden aspects in the qualitative data. If you let the AI code the data, and with those applications who build that in, you cannot give context information. The AI doesn't know anything about your research participants. You as a researcher maybe have talked to them, you have seen them, you know the context, you know a lot more. And if you just can upload the data, press a button, and the AI is doing everything for you, then what do you expect? The AI doesn't, the ChatGPT is not a trained qualitative researcher. ChatGPT is a generalist, has never learned anything about qualitative data analysis. It might be able to categorize data, but that's not the same as coding data. And that is often, like, seen as equivalent. And what I see a lot, and if I actually say that, we don't have to code data anymore, we can do analysis differently, then people just look at me and say, it's not in people's head yet that we can now, having this new technology, can rethink analysis and how to do it differently. We have been doing coding for so long that people now, what they're actually looking for is how AI can possibly help us with coding, because it's so long, it's so tedious, and how it can possibly help us. And yeah, you see, if you let the AI do it completely on its own, we get into all of these issues, and I've talked about that at other places. So this is completely independent of my evaluation here, but it kind of supports exactly that. And then, of course, we have applications where codes are only suggested, and of course the answer, people will say, yeah, it's only also if AI does the coding automatically, you still have to kind of look through it and change it, and you can still interfere and modify. But the issue with the way it's implemented now, it's going to take you even longer to modify all those AI generated codes than having it done from scratch immediately, because the suggested codes often don't work at all. So you have to do a lot of reworking. But then, of course, we have those functionality where the AI is not doing all the coding. You can just select one segment, and if you have no idea how to code it and you just want to have a little help with brainstorming, you can ask the AI to just please suggest some codes here. But then you wouldn't do that for your entire data set. You would just only do that for selected segments where you kind of feel like you get stuck. And now we get to the validity of it all. Yeah, because if you have it done all automatically, like, how can you be sure that it is actually correct? And how can you identify bias? So if you just kind of say, here's the data, and that unfortunately AI lies went into the direction. If you buy the full version of, or the paid version, there is a button, click, do thematic analysis, and then you will get a result. You can kind of interfere with that, but then you don't have no idea. Is that typically black box people talk about? You have no idea how the AI actually generated that result. It kind of gives you some references, so that is there. It does give you some references where it got the results from, but yeah, you would have to then check all the reference, go back into your data, and check whatever the AI has done and start correcting it. So look for those possibilities in tools. That's maybe the more general answer. If you click on a button and it generates something, do you get a reference? Are you allowed to go back into the data in order to check where the AI, what kind of data the AI actually took in order to make that suggestion? So that is one thing you as a researcher need to do, and that speaks to validity as one of the criteria for ethical research. And then the other part, my suggestion is like, how we can actually conduct research in a way that answers to all these challenges that we have in order to do good ethical research. And my answer to that is use a tool that is interactive, and also engage your qualitative method knowledge, because of like how to deal with bias and reflexivity. That is, I'm part of our toolkit as a qualitative researcher. And if you interact with the bot, then you can constantly reflect and check the answer and then interact further. So I will go very briefly through an example to just kind of give you an idea how you can engage with the bot in doing that. But the first would be to select a tool where you can upload data to a secure environment. There are some tools that are not built specifically for qualitative analysis, but for text analysis, like Chatbox and some PDF readers, but you can always save your stuff in as PDF. That shouldn't be really a problem. But where you are actually then have your data uploaded, and not in ChatGPT you can in the Plus version you can now also upload multiple documents, but that's not really secure. That's not, you are in this consumer OpenAI relationship, and might be some reports that you can upload, but you really have to decide, is that a space where I do want to upload my data, or do I give it into an environment where you can also check privacy and data the data protection they give you. A bonus then would also be if you can add context information about the study, so that the AI does not only know your data, but it knows where it's coming from, what's your research question, what's the goal of your project, maybe important literature, so that you can add all of that information, so the AI knows a bit more than just your data. And the next step is you asking question, so you are in control of the analysis. And this is some documents I played with, and it was about the effect of AI on the labor market. So I played around with some document, but just I don't have here the full answers, but that was getting pages and pages long. But it was kind of starting with one document at a time to just give you an idea of how I did it. And I was asking, how does generative AI change the requirements for skills in different professional fields? And with that question, I want to explore blah, blah, blah. So I gave the AI the information why I'm actually asking that question. And so this one, actually, I ask about all of the 5 documents I uploaded. So you do also see that I only get the answers based on my document. So that also helps the issue with hallucination. If you actually tell the AI, it's now only about documents. So don't tell me everything, anything from your knowledge that you have. We are only looking at the documents. And that's why I think we don't need coding anymore, because now the AI knows your content. It can remember the 1,000 pages or 2,000 you uploaded, and you should know that as well. That's the other ethical requirement in a way, because you cannot evaluate the answers that come out if you don't know the data. So that kind of cuts a bit like everybody who was hoping that you suddenly can, analyze hundreds of interviews, but you first also have to collect hundreds of interviews. Always the question is that actually necessary in qualitative analysis? But you cannot evaluate the outcome of what the bot gives you back if you don't know anything about the data. So that is another requirement. Then I went on to, I would like to know the answer of job 1 given to research question 1. So I could only ask, give me, some output there, because the bot knew about my research question 1, because I'd uploaded their context information. Otherwise, you always have to kind of formulate the stuff. And then it was only looking into document 1 and giving me an answer about that. And then I was following up, and because it gave me an answer, and said, well, please write me a list of the professional groups that are in there that are affected. So it then did that. Then we moved on to document 2. So I did that working with the AI chatbot along, working with, looking at one question I was interested in, and looking at more case-based in that example study. And if I would have more than 5 documents, I probably still would do that with the first few documents, and later, once I know what is this all about, then I would more generally ask, find some information about these concepts that by then you have developed in the other documents, so that you don't have to do case-by-case analysis with 20 documents. But the point is also here, same with other analysis, you get lots of information back. So then you have to start writing, you have to start in your own words, kind of condensing that information that the bot gives, because it's going to be lots of information. We know they like to be quite wordy, but we ask the bot here now actually to pull up that information so we can do something with it. And then also, if you don't understand when something comes out, you can ask back, well, I don't really understand that last point. Can you please describe in more detail? So that's what I mean with the interaction. that if you don't understand what it gives you, then you just ask. Or if you say, well, I think that answer is quite biased, give me, go back to the data. Is that really what the participants said? Could also be your participants were very biased. Or, there's something in your answer that comes from the training data that gave a biased answer. So we can actually control for these things if we are in control and if we're not pressing a button expecting an answer. And I think it's lots of fun to do that because now it's not boring coding. You are in an interaction. You can ask stuff, and of course start then writing about it. And then once I was done with my answering about that first aspect I was interested in, I was then asking for now look at the 5 documents. Where are there overlaps with regard to, would give you now more information about a certain concept I figured out, because what we know about the bots is they always look for commonalities. And then you have to ask them more about the individual aspects because you don't want to leave those out. Yeah, because we know they're kind of good in summary. So we always look for things that are similar. And so you can actually prompt it to just give you individual mentions as well. So when you're in a conversation with the AI, where you also can upload more background information, the AI still wouldn't know your participants and how the interviews went. That's still all your knowledge. But if you interact with the AI, while you have your knowledge, you can actually then evaluate what comes back from the bot and can also validate the answer. And yeah, I don't have it here. So a good tool should also always give you references and a way for you to, from the references, to go back into the data so you can actually check it. So it's you get a bit out of that black box and can kind of see where the answer is coming from. And if you tell it to just look into your corpus of data, it will stay in that corpus unless you explicitly ask it to leave the context. And that can be interesting as well. Because if you work with some major series that are not kind of that new that the bot doesn't know about it, you can also ask, how does this now relate to a particular theory? And then, of course, you ask it to maybe to be a bit more creative. But if you know the theory, it's kind of like just an interesting way of how our AI relates it to the findings that you have, and then you can take it from there again. So you take it back, you take the responsibility, and work from there. So the AI is not doing the analysis for you. It's just like pulling out the stuff that you want to hear. Or not that you want to hear, but that you want to think that you want to get out. And yeah, so just a quote from mine that is, we already, have that very long, that we need to be reflective in our research. And as I mentioned already, if you're in that interactive space, well, you can also talk with your AI bot about potential bias that you see in the data and maybe also ask for different perspectives on it. This seems to be very biased towards this. So if you look at the data again, can we pull out different aspects or look at it from a different perspective? So the AI assistant will be better with your input, and you need to have, that's why you need to have the knowledge about the data. And maybe you know that when you ask this ChatGPT, it gives you a number of things, and then you can say, well, there's something missing, and you say, well, can you tell me more about another aspect he didn't list, or it, or whatever, and then it does give you then some more information about that, but you have to explicitly prompt it for that because it mightn't just give you that with the first answer. So I think that approach will give you, we have now almost, the hour is almost up, but this approach will give you a lot of control and will actually help to solve a lot of the challenges that are out there when we talk about ethics in regard to analysis that you read, about, it gives you something, you don't have any control, how the results were generated and so on. So then we have an ethical problem. If you have a few more minutes, I like to go through the writing part, and then that also completes the presentation. So this is just a lot of the kind of helpful tips on what you how you can actually write about that you've used a bot. So very important is that issue of transparency. It's the same as with your confidential agreement, be transparent. And here as well, if you work with an AI support, then be transparent. So there could be different ways of how you've used it in your writing, whether it's just for proofreading, that you sometimes you give it certain sentences and can you check my grammar? But you cannot upload the entire document, but you can upload bits and pieces. Or whether you have used it also for idea generation, but then that were revised by you, or even for drafting. But that might also be maybe for drafting an interview guide and something that then you reworked and revised, because it's always important that you also indicate, what is my input here, and that you use AI just, to give you some ideas, and that you then work from that. I think a lot of us who already use ChatGPT a lot for helping us with our writing, that's kind of like a lot how we use it. But then we all know we cannot just take whatever it's produced. We always need to change and revise that again. But so just be open about it, what you did. If you use the tool, you cite or acknowledge the tool. And I have a little table, which one you cite and which one you acknowledge. You have some example here below. So if it's most of it, it's not a person, but it's more a company if you use a certain tool. And then also the version is important, and the model if you that is used and when it was published. And in the end, I also have some references where you can read up some more information on that. Academic Insights, I look at their blog. They have a number of articles on that, and that's also from their blog. And what they recommend it if you only use a tool for an informal literature review, well, you don't have to cite that tool. But if you do a systematic literature review, then of course you need to cite the tool, whether it's illicit or Google's. There is a lot of tools now, and I can actually share that with you as well. I found it that other people have done that for me, so I don't have to. It's not my work, but I have a long list of literature review tools that a lot of them are also free of charge, so you don't have to pay anything for them. That can actually help you with your literature review. You wouldn't use ChatGPT for that. That doesn't work very well. But there are more specific tools that help you with that. And then if you use it for writing your research article, well, you don't have to cite it, but you can just acknowledge that you use that. So in that is more acknowledging part of how you used it and what is your input and where the AI helps. So you don't need to actually mention the tool here. That's more if you actually use it for analysis, or because systematic literature review is just your main thing that you're doing. And then the last thing, you could also, of course, then reflect on the potential distortions that are in there, and write something about how you have mitigated that because we know the training data is biased, responses might be biased, but I think a lot of that you can already minimize with that conversational approach I was asking about, because you're always in control. Of course, the biases are an issue if AI does the analysis for you, or mostly for you, or you don't have any control. Then the distortions that are in there, all of these issues, of course, apply. The more automated you go through, the more you interact with an AI, the better you can control for that. And then I think, we all know that the disclosure of conflict of interest also generally with your study, but you can also reflect on that if you're using a commercial tool, whether there is some conflict of interest there. So with that, I managed to kind of go through it in the time. So there's a number of references and links for you then also to look at and to find some more information.